but how about this for a record? 128 goals scored and only 5 conceded.
Hello everybody, welcome back to ESPN's Football Forecast. I laugh as I say that because we're not forecasting much at the moment. Myself, James Allcott, and my boy, Hugh Woozencroft, who you were better than me, to be fair. But we did suggest, and I don't want to get into specifics, one of us said that the Arsenal-Chelsea game or Chelsea-Arsenal game would be a mauling for Chelsea. I don't want to get into specifics who said that word, mauling. Could have been me. It could have been you. But the important thing is that I got both my predictions wrong. Leicester, I thought Man United were going to win, and I thought Chelsea were going to destroy Arsenal. But did anyone think Arsenal were going to get anything out of that game? Come on.
No, they didn't. And it was a really surprising performance from Chelsea, to be perfectly honest. The changes that their manager Thomas Tuchel made as well, when they've got a massive game coming up this weekend, of course, the FA Cup final against Leicester. So what sort of preparation do you think that was?
Well, I think first thing I would say is that they robbed is a strong word, and I've got to stop using strong words. but they dominated that game. The goal was, a bit of a freak goal, and they hit the bar a couple of times. I think the most concerning thing for me in terms of watching Chelsea going into this huge FA Cup final, and actually just a huge double header now because the top four has just been bust wide open, is that they're not taking their chances. You know, they had so much domination of the ball, and Arsenal really overall were quite comfortable. I thought the one thing you've got to say for Arsenal is that their defensive shape suggested that they are still playing for the manager, I think. What do you think?
Well, that's a massive one. That's a massive shout. In terms of the fans supporting Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal boss, it was a huge result. And yes, the Arsenal players, they applied themselves, let's call it that. But I think if Chelsea's first team were out, it would have been a different result. I think if Mendy was in goal instead of Kepa Arrizabalaga, it would have been a different result totally, because let's be honest, that goal was a freak goal and it came from a bit of misunderstanding. Thomas Tuchel, the manager, said, I blame myself. I take full responsibility. I shouldn't have made that number of changes. But what it does mean is N'Golo Conte is going to be fit and fresh for the weekend. He's been in fantastic form. Timo Werner's been pretty important to Chelsea. We've spoken about him before. He got a rest as well. Yes, they dropped a massive 3 points in terms of the Premier League race. But it means that going into the weekend, they can probably have their full strength team fit and firing. Cesar Azpilicueta came off early in the game as well, a little bit earlier on than we'd expect. He usually plays the full 90 minutes, of course. I just think when you look ahead to the weekend, the way that Leicester performed against Manchester United wasn't any kind of test. Look, I know people will say there were 7 full internationals in Manchester United's team, but let's be frank here. That was not Manchester United at their full strength. And it was nothing like what Chelsea will bring at Wembley Stadium on the weekend. So it wasn't really the way that Leicester City would want to warm up for an FA Cup final. It wasn't for Chelsea either, but I think Thomas Tuchel knows what he did wrong. And I think the players will understand with their full strength team, they're a totally different prospect. The only thing that I would say about the game as a whole, it can be a hugely emotional event for players that haven't been in a cup final before. Well, Chelsea have. They were in an FA Cup final last season.
They're in it every year.
It's ridiculous how often Chelsea are in the FA Cup final. In fact, this is the 5th year in a row that they've been in either a domestic or a European final. That experience, I think, is going to tell. Leicester City have not reached an FA Cup final since 1969. It's been around 20 years since they've been in a cup final of any description. So even though their players have had, some of them, a Premier League title to their names, for many of the players in the Leicester squad, this experience is going to be something totally new. And in many ways, I think the experience of the Chelsea players in these big games, of course, they've got a Champions League final to come as well. It almost feels like they've played 3 or 4 cup finals already this season, Chelsea. So it's going to be really hard to look beyond them for the cup final, especially given their record in this competition. For many Chelsea fans, this is their trophy, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, they lost to Arsenal last year. But going into this, I think, yes, of course, you have to put them as favourites, despite losing that element of momentum, I guess, by losing that game against Arsenal. I think if you pick the bones of it, you could suggest that, they still did dominate the game. It's interesting, Tuchel's words at that post-match interview. He knew what he was talking about, what particularly sort of irked him about the selection that he put together. He blamed himself for that selection. I think that as much as it might have been Kepa, I actually think it was the midfield too of Gilmour and Jorginho. I don't think you needed both of those two guys together. I think they're quite similar. So I think he will bring in Kante for this game, and I think that will turn them into a very different animal, because you can then allow Jorginho to be at the base of that team, and then you've got more players moving forward. You talk about experience there. I think it's an interesting point when it comes to Leicester as well, because yes, it is a young team, but there is that one man who, of course, missed that game against Manchester United, was injured in the warm-up. Johnny Evans is going to be crucial in this game. I mean, if he can play. If he doesn't play, does that take away the chances for Leicester City? Because I think there's a few questions here with Leicester. There's one with Johnny Evans. Does he start? And if he doesn't, how do they set up? But also in that midfield area, Maddison didn't start that Man United game. I think the midfield battle could be a really key area in this game. What do you think?
I mean, I totally agree. You've got some fantastic midfielders at Leicester, the likes of Yuri Tielemans, Wilfred Ndidi's been fantastic as well. But the question mark for me is, if you look at the games that Chelsea maybe have struggled to score goals in or create chances in, a back five, a back three, if you like, it's been awkward for them. Do Leicester, a huge call for their manager, Brendan Rodgers, do they change their formation if Johnny Evans is missing? Do they try and play a back five? Because the isolation for Luke Thomas in particular against Manchester United led to a goal. A young player, an inexperienced player who scored, by the way, one of the goals of the season. What a volley that was. What a finish. But equally, this is going to be a game where I think Leicester are going to be defending for huge parts of the game, and he's going to really have to be on it. And do you give him a little bit of help, but it would be a huge call for Leicester to change the way that they've been comfortable in playing all season. But they could be exposed. Timo Werner's pace in particular will worry Leicester City. They'll have to try and control large parts of the game. As I've said to you before, that doesn't ever seem to happen with Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea. They always seem to dominate the ball. They always seem to have a huge amount of possession, and they're very comfortable with it. Wembley Stadium is a huge pitch as well. If you don't have the ball, you get very, very tired. And we've seen that in cup finals, not just in the FA Cup, but in the Champions League as well. One side can be really drained on a huge pitch at Wembley Stadium if they don't get much of the ball, and that has played a huge part in results as well. So, look, the Leicester City midfield, as good as they've been, and in particular, I'd love to see James Maddison start. Rumours that he's fallen out with the manager, Brendan Rodgers. He came off the bench in the last game. He's the sort of player who could really, in a cup final on a stage like that, he's almost the man, the personality, the character, the ego to go and try and stranglehold win an FA Cup final when you're underdogs. Do you rely on someone like James Maddison, who's been so great over the last couple of seasons, and bring him in, even if he hasn't been of great form of late? For me, some massive calls for Brendan Rodgers to make Kelechi Iheanacho in great goal-scoring form.
Yeah.
Doesn't do a lot defensively. You're not going to have much possession. So what do you do with him as well? There's some massive calls for Leicester City. And I think the comfort level of Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel right now means this is theirs to lose. And I said that about the Arsenal game. So
I'm scared. Well, yeah, I'm scared to predict here. I am scared to predict. Let's get to that point of it then. I think that big pitch, I think it's going to be interesting because you cannot not play Iheanacho. He scored more goals in the FA Cup than any other player this season. He's on absolute fire. If you look at his XG is 7 goals. He scored 11 this season. Jamie Vardy, his XG is 17. He's only scored 13, and 6 of those have been penalties as well. So you kind of need to play both of them. I'm a romantic, and there's something about Jamie Vardy in this game that I just wonder. It would be the bravest of brave decisions to not play Iheanacho in this game. But I do wonder if you were able to play Vardy in a more central position, you'd be able to soak up pressure a little bit better, and you'd also be better on the counter-attack. He's often having to drift out to the side a lot of the time to start those runs, which again, I understand, and I think that could work for them. But if you want that extra body and maybe that little bit more control, then there could be a big call for Brendan Rodgers, who will no doubt have a very specific plan for this game, regardless if Johnny Evans plays or not. My prediction, my heart says Leicester City to get that first FA Cup since 1960. To get their first FA Cup, full stop. My head says 2-1 to Chelsea, Vardy to score, and both teams obviously to score in this game. I think that's what's going to happen for me. I think Vardy will get one, but I think he'll still get his heart broken, unfortunately.
Chelsea, and this is what I mean about that big pitch, the way that they play, there's always a player filling the void, filling the gap when the opposition have the ball. Everywhere you turn, there's going to be a Chelsea shirt, Chelsea player. I think it's really difficult for Leicester. I hope and pray, always do, that there's going to be an open and entertaining FA Cup final. Huge spectacle, of course. A 140th FA Cup final. It's just a massive game in terms of the English football calendar. And we know fans all over the world tune in for this game as well. Everyone's favourite second team, Leicester City, playing as well, of course, after that Premier League title win, 2016 it was. So, look, it's a really tough one to call. With Johnny Evans, if he is missing, I think set pieces will be crucial. I know they scored a set piece against Manchester United, of course, but I think Chelsea will score a set piece in this game. Kurt Zouma, I think, is fantastic in the air, so I think he will get himself on the score sheet. Both teams to score in an entertaining game, but I think ultimately Chelsea are going to win the match. So, look, it's one that I look forward to, as I say. Part of me desperately hopes Leicester City will win it, but I think my head, like you, says Chelsea.
And I think, look, that game, of course, is going to be so interesting in terms of the game then on Tuesday, where they've got to play each other to fight out for the top four. Let's move on to Serie A then, Hugh. Let's have a look at, we're talking about Champions League qualification, and we've done the numbers before we started filming here, and we've figured out just how huge this game was. I think, look, you look at the headline, Juventus versus Inter Milan, and you think that's big enough on its own. But then you think of all the sort of the backstories and beautiful narratives that are within it. The situation with Ronaldo, the situation with Buffon, the situation with Antonio Conte playing against Juventus. Where do you want to start with this one? Because it's do or die for Juventus at this stage.
It is. I mean, and what a subplot. Of course, Antonio Conte's won 3 Scudettos as Juventus's boss. He's played 420 games for the club. He will hurt, really. I know deep down inside the affection that he has for Juventus. He will be hurting if they miss out on a place in the Champions League. I know, in a way, of course, it's opposition. He would have wanted to see Andrea Pirlo do well in the role, of course. You just expect Juventus are going to challenge for the title, and he would have been as surprised as anyone to see what they've done this season, because they still have a number of good players in their squad. But I just think there is a gulf in class right now between Inter Milan and everyone else in the Serie A, not just Juventus, but I think Juventus are just struggling at the moment for results, and the responsibility for it all comes down to Andrea Pirlo. If you compare it to Arsenal, let's compare the two managers. Young, inexperienced, maybe in a job too soon, let's be frank about it, and maybe about to lose their jobs this summer. Both of them continually change their formations. They often change their personnel. I think it's been 34 different starting lineups for Andrea Pirlo during his first season in charge of Juventus, maybe 35 now. I mean, that's just too many. You want a rhythm, you want a comfort level. I talk about it all the time. These players want to know how one another play. They want to know the runs they're going to make. They want to know the way to pass. It's not an exact science, but at times that relationship on the pitch is so important. And Juventus they haven't seemed to have built it as the season's gone on. He hasn't really seemed to have found his favoured team, his best team, as good as some of the players in his squad are. And going up against an Inter Milan side who you'd think, well, they've got nothing to play for, but ultimately we know how huge this game is for the fans. It may well be a game that Antonio Conte wants his players to lay down a marker for going into next season as well, just in case there is a Juventus resurgence. So I just don't see how Inter Milan and the form that they've been on.
They've got better, haven't they, since they've won the league?
Honestly, it's baffling. They've scored 10 goals, I think, in the last few games. 5 last time out. Was it 3 the game before that as well? They're happy right now. It's
some fire away kits as well, by the way, being showcased as well. Yeah, I think it's amazing for Juventus. I was looking into the stats a little bit, and what's interesting is that this sort of 4-4-2 that Juventus have played. I then started to go, okay, with that 4-4-2, you've got a man less in midfield. So one of those front two have got to offer up a lot of work rate. And so the front two, Dybala, I think we know how hard he works. Morata has been the chosen man quite often for Juventus this season. And then, dare I say it, I looked at Ronaldo and his stats. Now, if you look at his stats, in terms of the top 5 leagues, he is in the top 2% in any, creating shots, scoring goals, like everything that you would want from your out-and-out striker. Apart from one, he's in the worst percentage So 99% of players in the forwards in the top 5 leagues have better level of pressures per game. Now, I know that's not Ronaldo's job, and I'm not blaming him for that. He's a Rolls Royce and he plays in a different way. But I do wonder if the players around him and that second striker has been a problem for Juventus this season. And when I look at this game, I'm concerned about that midfield three of Inter Milan. And I wonder if, it would, again, another poetic storyline to a point, is that central midfield area, that place where Pirlo lived and breathed and rejoiced with his passing ability and owning those midfields. I wonder if that could be the killer for Juventus and their Champions League hopes. Because you look at the games for the other teams here, and it could go to the last day, but it could be over this weekend, couldn't it?
Absolutely, it could. If Juventus are beaten and the teams around them in that race for a top 4 spot win their matches, that's it, curtains. Look, it's just simply Juventus's cup final, all their biggest games rolled into one. You can't imagine a club like this that has won so many Scudettos in a row, doesn't even reach the top 4, doesn't even reach the Champions League. It's unthinkable for that club and all the turmoil that's gone on off the pitch this season. But the 3 players you mentioned, you talk about the front line of Juventus. Cristiano Ronaldo, he has to take care of his body. Yeah. He's done so well with that over the last few years. He strikes when it matters most. He has his body in action when it matters most. The ball drops in and around him and he comes alive. But the reality of the situation is, you look at those 3 players, you talk about Morata, you talk about Ronaldo, you talk about Dybala. What are they like when things aren't going right? What are they like when the game isn't going their way? I'd love to say that their approach to matches and their attitude is always 100%. But there are egos there that get frustrated when things aren't going right. They're not used to that in their careers. They're used to being at big, successful clubs and worrying about winning league titles. That's what they want to be all about. This season, it hasn't been that for them. And you just wonder if that frustration against Inter Milan will creep in. And at the other end of the pitch, of course, for Inter Milan, you've got players who've really applied themselves this season. The attitude, the work rate, the desire has always been there. Maybe that comes directly from Antonio Conte. We know what his attitude, his strength, his tenacity was like, his determination out on the pitch when he was a player, all those seasons, all those trophies whilst playing for Juventus. And he's carried that into his managerial career. Maybe the 2 sides in many ways reflect their managers. Andrea Pirlo just looks like he's bereft of ideas at times. I find it really difficult to think Juventus are going to win this game. For me, when you think about it, the only thing that I could find that would be a positive side, a good omen for Juventus was, of course, the last time that Inter Milan lost 17 games ago. It was in the Coppa Italia. It was the last time they conceded more than 1 goal, but it was against Juventus. So they have beaten them this season, although, that came in the Coppa Italia last time around. They can look to that match with, some confidence and say, hold on a minute, as great as they've been, what is it, 1 defeat in 24 games? As good as Inter Milan have been, we are maybe the one side that they're a little bit wary of, and they can maybe, not put in their best performance. It's a difficult one to call. I think it's going to be really, really tight. I do expect goals in this game because, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a cup final. Inter Milan maybe a little bit more relaxed because, of course, they don't have anything to play for. They are the champions. Juventus have it all to play for. So I think it's going to be end to end. It might be, throw in the kitchen sink time towards the end of the game. I think there's going to be over 3.5 goals. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. But it is a tough one to call. Again, we've made predictions on form alone. And on form alone, you'd have to say it's Inter Milan. Am I right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And even in maybe the dominance of the game, you look at that Sassuolo victory, Juventus didn't have the bulk of possession, so they weren't even truly dominating that game in itself, which is incredible, really. I just keep seeing Ronaldo and big games, and those two things are a beautiful partnership. And I'd be amazed if he doesn't score in this game. I think it's maybe I'm off the back of some really bad predictions here, but I feel like he might drag them to something in this game. I want it to go to the last game of the season, and Buffon as well. It's going to be interesting after that penalty save. Is he going to play in this game? 43. He's talking about how he's at the end of his cycle with them, but he's won Serie A 10 times. to play 657 games and to go out on this in this way would just be so sad for him. I wanted to go to the final day. I know.
You're so romantic. I'm looking at your shirt right now, and I know that you go with your heart because I can see it. I can literally see it.
I'm going to go with. I wanted to go to the last days. I'm going to go with Ronaldo. I know. I'm going to go Ronaldo to drag them over the line on this one, but I don't think it will be a deserved victory. And I think it will go to that final game, which, of course, guys, remember, AC Milan play Atalanta in that final game. But we did the numbers, and when you look at the head-to-head for all of these, Juventus are in huge trouble. Their head-to-head against all of these teams is not better, and so they need to get above Napoli. Ideally, I think on points, that's probably their best chance. And Napoli have got some easier games, starting off with Fiorentina and then finishing off with Verona. So it's a scary time for Juventus fans, and we haven't even spoken about the top brass in Serie A talking about if they don't walk away from the Super League officially, they might even get themselves chucked into Serie B. But maybe that's a conversation for another time.
That might be a good excuse for him, to be honest. Maybe Andrea Pirlo can hang his hat on that.
Exactly. Yeah, and then
League, but they get demoted to Serie B. I don't think anyone's going to talk about his performance as a manager. So
true. And I think for the players as well, the exodus will come again, I think, if that was to happen. Let's finish off with probably the biggest game of the weekend, which is that Champions League final, the Women's Champions League final, Chelsea against Barcelona. And just first of all, I think we've just got to be so excited about women's football right now. I went to the Women's World Cup. It feels like it was last year, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't because obviously last year's been very difficult for everyone. And I remember just loving the kind of loving the games that I went to, loving the vibe that was there, and really feeling like, wow, this is really, really starting to kick off now. And the focus on women's sport in general has been lifted, which is fantastic to see. And the standard has gone through the roof as well. And we've got two fantastic teams, Hugh, in this Champions League final, don't we?
We have. Look, it's going to be hard for me not to look through the lens of an English football fan seeing Chelsea in a Women's Champions League final for the first time. But it's going to be a huge task for them going up against the Barcelona side with one of, if not the greatest record in the history of domestic football. They won 26 out of 26 on their way to their domestic title. But how about this for a record? 128 goals scored and only 5 conceded. I mean, when you look at that, how could we ever predict that they're going to lose this game? But of course, I think on the way to this final in the Champions League, it hasn't been as comfortable. The strength of European competition has meant that we know that there are some weaknesses in this Barcelona team, and there are plenty in the Chelsea side as well. I just think it's fantastic that firstly, there's going to be a new name on the trophy. Lyon's dominance in this competition has been broken. They've won the last 5 Champions League titles. But also, of course, the new investment that's going into football and the big clubs that have backed it as well. That's really important. Of course, Real Madrid, but Manchester United as well domestically here. Manchester City too, really putting money behind the women's game. Chelsea have done this, by the way, for a long, long time. This has been coming. Their manager, Emma Hayes, is more like a CEO of the women's side of their team. She's controlled everything, and she has done so well to emerge, I think, from a title-winning team she had a few years ago to lose the likes of Chapman, Luco, and come back with a new team, recruit the likes of Sam Kerr, Pernilla Harder as well. She's done absolutely fantastically well to come back with a side that I think plays even better football and just have real confidence. They too are domestic title winners this season as well, and they come past a very strong Manchester City side, winning their game on the final day. So they didn't crack under pressure, and they've had some big pressure games of late too. Looking ahead to the game, though, I think it's going to be a really entertaining one. I think we're going to have a classic. I don't know which team you want me to talk about first, but again, I look at it through the lens of Chelsea. Chelsea play a style that is really good to watch. It's a counter-attacking style. The relationship between their front three, Pernilla Harder, Frank Kirby, and Sam Kerr, is telepathic at times. They break on teams with pace and with skill, and they've got a couple of lethal finishers in their side. And that is what has carried them so far through this competition. I am slightly worried about them They're playing a team who are sensational in front of goal in the shape of Barcelona. They create so many chances. They finish them as well. But I look at the quarterfinal, I look at the semi-final. They played Wolfsburg, they played Bayern Munich in those games. Both excellent sides. And the first legs of those games, Chelsea's defense, I mean, it was just really difficult to watch. They gave away chance after chance. 29 shots on goal against Wolfsburg, 30 shots on goal in the two legs against Bayern Munich. There is no second chance for Chelsea this time around. They have to hit the ground running. And I think it will come down to a battle between Magdalena Eriksson in the heart of the Chelsea defence and Jenny Hermoso, the false nine, the goal-scoring talent at the heart of Barcelona's attack. If she has a big game, she wins that battle, then I think it's going to be a great day for Barcelona, because she's a bit like Roberto Firmino. She's the great link-up player. She can get on the score sheet as well, but everything goes through her at the moment. And I think also Eriksson in the heart of the Chelsea defence, she starts a lot of their attacks. She's great on the ball. She springs a lot of those counter-attacks with great balls further down the pitch, out of the heart of defence to counter on teams. So really, it comes down to a battle between those two, who can impress not just, in terms of the physical battle between the two of them, but with the ball at their feet as well. I honestly think this is going to be a fantastic game with so many interesting subplots as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, look, Barcelona play, like for those people that don't watch too much women's football and will be tuning into this one, excited to see these two teams. Barcelona play like Barcelona. They're going to control the ball. They're going to keep the ball. And I look with Chelsea, I look to that Man City, that 2-2 draw. I remember watching that and thinking, I was concerned about the defense as well. But Eriksson wasn't playing in that game. And I think you're so right. When she comes in, and actually, I think with English sides through the years, that having that sort of that great core of English players, and we do have that, and like Fran Kirby, what a great example of that. And she burst on the scene. We knew she was going to be legendary. She has been legendary. But that sprinkle of those other players, Sam Kerr, as you said, Eriksson, as you said, Harder, as you said, I think that takes them to a slightly different level. And the big thing for me when it comes to Barcelona is the fact that the centre-back Pereira is suspended for this game. Patry, who is that playmaker for them in the sort of defensive, or the base, of that midfield, she will have to drop back into centre-back. And that could hurt them in terms of their passing rotations, which is a big way of how they play. And also how Chelsea set up in that game against Manchester City with Harder in that position, like you say, almost as like a false nine, a number 10. That might be an interesting way of stopping Barcelona, hurting them high up the pitch and being able to get the ball to those two lethal finishers in Fran Kirby and Sam Kerr. It's intriguing.
I think it's interesting what you say there. The first leg against Bayern Munich, they played 5 at the back. Now, that is not the Barcelona way. But if they do have one of their key defenders missing, will they, a bit like the FA Cup final I mentioned, will they change their style of play? Because Chelsea found it so difficult to play against Bayern in that first leg, who for some reason decided to change their formation going into the second leg, and Chelsea were allowed to be at their fluid attacking best. But I think the coaches going into this one, they have to look at where the other teams, because let's be honest, there aren't too many of those games to look at where the other teams haven't been as successful. You really have to focus in on where these teams have been hurt by their opposition during the course of that season. You're looking at 1, 2, possibly 3 examples where these teams weren't dominant during the course of the season.
Yeah.
So from a coaching perspective, this is harder than the men's Champions League final will be to prepare for. Like I say, it's going to be, I think it will be open. I think they'll both know that if they attack to their best, that's their best chance. So I'm hoping it's end to end. Maybe this is me, just a silly football fan, praying that a cup final delivers. I think it will be 3-2 to one of the teams. There's a part of me that says Barcelona might edge it 3-2. The emotional energy, I think that's a big one. The emotional investment from Emma Hayes and Chelsea. She spoke about how she'd spoken to the Chelsea chief executive, Bruce Buck, a year ago, and she said, we are going to be in the Champions League final next year and we will be playing Barcelona. Her premonition came true, but she's also spoken about how this has been her life's work at Chelsea to reach the Champions League final. It's all she's ever dreamt of. That message has been in the media and it's been to her players for weeks on end now. They're going to know just how much this means. Barcelona, on the other hand, were runners-up in 2019. They've played in a game of this magnitude of late. they're going to know exactly how it feels, not just to play in that game, but to lose it as well. And it might be about who manages the occasion better, you know, from that butterflies in your stomach perspective. We know that players get before a big game. Who copes best? That for me could be Barcelona. And that's why I think it could be a 3-2 win for them.
Yeah, it's so tough to call this. It really is. I think the goalkeeper's got a big part to play. Sandra Pagnos and Katrin Berger. And Katrin Berger has just been absolutely astonishing for them this season. Since she arrived at the club.
Tough.
It's so tough. I think you're right. I think there's going to be goals. And I think 3-2 is a really good shout as well. It really is a toss of a coin. I think you're right. Maybe that little bit of experience in those kind of games, and maybe that ability to control the ball might just be enough for Barcelona in this game. So I'm going to give it to Barcelona. But really, I mean, don't listen to me, guys. Please don't listen to me with my predictions at the moment. They stink. Listen to Hugh. He said the same, so we're probably right. So there you have it, guys. That's what we think on some huge games, a huge weekend. I think the big thing is what do you guys think? Let us know down below. Who's going to win? Will Juventus finish in the top 4?
Absolutely.
Who will win the FA Cup? And who is going to win the Women's Champions League? Let us know down below. Hugh, thank you for joining me. It's always lovely to chat and get things wrong on camera for people. It's always lovely to do that. Thanks for joining us.
Make sure you tweet us all with telling us how wrong we were as well. We appreciate that. YouTube as well.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys get involved. Thanks for joining us on ESPN's Football Forecast. We'll see you next time.